Merkel Media.
I'm exhausted, looking for everything in the shadows. Start looking at people like they don't matter. I'm waking up to the fact, more than a little bit shallow. I'm lost in this hole, but I don't wanna. I'm lost in this hole, 'cause I'm just trying to
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Free the Rabbits. I'm glad all you free-range rabbits are back here today. I have got a guest in the studio today. I'm really excited about this. She does the rounds. I see her popping in and out on different shows. I do the social media work for Wanayala, and I have cut a lot of clips on some of the stuff you've done. So that was part of it. And I've just seen you all over the place, and I've heard some of your shows, which is really great. This is Heidi Luv from Unfiltered Rise Podcast. I'm glad to have you on today. I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about. It's going to be very interesting, I think, for the listeners. But if you can, tell everybody who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your background.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to collaborate on this. And I was excited when you asked because I know you don't typically, and so I was like, yeah, that's awesome. And I am Heidi Luv of the Unfiltered Rise Podcast. I do my podcast in Utah. I grew up in Utah and I grew up as a Mormon for most of my life. And when I got out, I decided I would deep dive what the heck I was doing. And I found out, maybe this is really weird. And then it got really extra weird. And so I'm going to briefly leave it there because I know you don't want to deep dive into that, but I wasn't it my whole life. My family is basically Mormon royalty. Like they are like straight back to the head honchos of this whole thing. So yeah, it's a little weird. And I got kicked out of my family. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty typical. I had a good friend of mine when I lived in Georgia, and she was an ex-Jehovah's Witness, and the same thing. They pretty much disowned her. Her father would show up on Sundays for an hour and sit at the bar where she bartended just to see her, but that was the only time that they would really see her, which was really weird too. But she said it was, she was in a cult pretty much, and she talked about getting out and how bad it was when she got out as far as being ostracized from the family. And it's really tough too with the siblings she grew up with. She kind of understood the mother and father structure banning her, but then when she couldn't even talk to her siblings who she grew up with, that was a little rough. So I don't know how that was for you, if it was kind of the same thing or...
So my family was a little bit weird. So my grandma's side is like Mormon royalty, and my grandpa's side is directly from Chicago, like from the streets. So it was a little weird. He was actually a Catholic, and he did convert later in life. So he was already passed away. My grandma did not take it well. I was kind of her extra child because my mom, I became a ward of the court. And so when I was young, my grandma kind of raised me from 12 and up. And so I was the kid that made it. Like I was the only one out of all their kids that went through the temple. And So when I told her I was leaving and that it was a cult and no hard feelings, love you, like still want to be in your life, like, yeah, it did not go well. My brother was never part of it. He was like smarter than me, I think. He lived with other people and he got out of there, he was like in the Navy and stuff. So he was born again Christian from the get-go. And I look at him and I'm like, yeah, probably lucky back then, but he has passed away now too. So I don't have a whole lot of family anymore that's alive other than my kids. So, which we have quite a few together. So.
Oh,
There's
nice.
6,
Okay.
because Mormons. Mormons, right? Oh my gosh.
Did you have your children while you were still a Mormon and then you got out?
So half, yes. I was pregnant with my youngest daughter, who was a big surprise in my life. To let you kind of know, we're grandparents and we have an 11-year-old. So that was a surprise. And she was not ever raised in the church. And I see a lot of different dynamics with her, which is so nice. And my son, he came at the tail end of it, like maybe only till he was 2. I mean, very briefly. He never got baptized, thank heavens. My first 2 came at my very most like staunch part of my life. And it shows. The oldest one, actually, I worry a lot about her because we're estranged and I can say at least this, all of my kids are not Mormon anymore or at all have any affiliation. So they're all either saved, born again Christian, or that daughter is a Baptist, I believe. But like I said, I kind of got kicked out of her life. So her husband doesn't like me. I think I said something bad once. He only met me 3 times, but his family's a banking family. And it was when I got just barely into conspiracies and I had just like blah, 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 Freemason stuff. And then he was like, and I think maybe I hit a nerve. I can't prove that. I'm just saying he got up and left the table twice. Now that I know Tom is pretty good, I'm like, oh man, maybe that's why. I don't know. So, yeah.
Yeah, it just depends on who you run into in the Freemason circles that are Freemasons. I mean, I'm a Freemason or former. So I say former. Tony likes to say you still are. And I'm like, well,
once you're in, it's like a Mormon, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like once you're in type thing, but you can't walk away and you're not practicing. And I haven't practiced in years and years and years. And I have no desire to at this point. And that's why I say former when I tell people that.
Right, because you don't identify with it anymore. Yeah.
Correct. And you will have some people that get angry about that. But I can say typically most Freemasons really don't care. And most of them are just in it for the fraternity aspect. They're not even in it for even
like
what
the
I was in
brotherhood
it
part.
for.
Yeah, just like, but I think I was striking nerves because you have to know I was also talking about banking and he's a pilot and his mom's a vice president of a bank. I didn't know all that. Okay. I was just running at the mouth at dinner and I've learned, but he also is, we have 6 kids and he came at my son's graduation and it was just such an awkward time because I was so busy and he just was not, I think he felt like I didn't treat him important enough because he's a pilot and he's very important. You should just ask. I'm so mean. I love my daughter. I hope she comes home someday, but I'm just really tired of his baloney. He ran credit checks on us. He ran background checks on us. The parents. I mean, I was
That's
like,
wild.
What are you doing? Like, this is weird. First of all, I'm a nurse. Like, I'm clean, bro. Like, my mom was like, run one on him. I'm like, he's a pilot. It's pointless. Yeah, he's good. Like same thing with nurses. Don't waste your money. But it was a weird dynamic. And I just basically feel like he wanted the girl. He didn't want the family. He moved her clear across the country. And I don't think he wanted to deal with it. Basically.
Yeah. And I've got older children myself. So I know what it's like to not really know what they say to their
Right.
significant other either. So you got that
Yeah.
aspect of it too. Now, my kids and I are very close, and they talk to me pretty much about everything. And my son is about to be in the military here in the next couple
good.
months. So yeah, he's dual tracking right now to either be
Awesome.
Air Force or Space Force. So he'll be in either one of those. And you know, all my conspiracy friends are all like, he's going to Space Force.
I know my face. X-File. What?
I told
You're
my
like,
son, I was like, I need to know, like,
Van
whatever
over
you
bush.
find
What?
out. He's like, Dad, no, I can't tell you anything. I was like, just nod if I ask you something.
Yeah. You're like, just give me the look. Give me some kind of look on this. He'll know
Right.
Mormons. If he goes into space, he's gonna know a lot of Mormons.
Yeah, for sure.
They love the
Yeah.
Mormons. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh.
What's up, guys? Before we get back into the episode, I just wanted to let people know here on YouTube who have been reaching out to me asking how they can donate to the show to help with the show's growth. You can become a member here on YouTube now. We have 3 different tiers: Nephilim Portal Babies, Nephilim Hunter, and Good Nephilim. And all of them have a few different things that are different from each other. One of the main things that all 3 of them have is custom emojis that you can use in any of the chats or in any of the comments. Again, guys, I really appreciate you listening to the show, and that's the best way possible to donate is your time. And make sure you share it, guys. Share the show. But yeah, I want to start with some Joseph Smith stuff. And for people that are
Sure.
listening, our goal today is to talk about the connection between Joseph Smith and Aleister Crowley and the significance of that connection, because Joseph Smith came prior to Crowley. Obviously, he was dead by the time Crowley came along. But Crowley was fascinated with him and was enamored with him, and he considered him one of his heroes, you know, putting him up there in the echelon of guys that he would throw into Gnostic mass to pray to. Now, we don't have any kind of evidence that he had people praying to Joseph Smith, but he did put them in his writings in the pantheon. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you know this, and we'll talk about this later, he actually talks about Joseph Smith in his book Moonchild. He actually
Yes.
puts him in that book. There's a paragraph that I'm going to read today. He actually
Oh, good. Okay. Good.
implements him into his famous fictional book that wasn't fiction at the same time.
Yeah, I don't think it was. Yeah, I don't think so. I think he was telling us some things. And you know, that's the funny thing about the occult is Christians so often have a problem, right, with people studying the occult. But I don't know if you've heard how I became a podcaster. It was totally a God thing. And I was like, God, I think you need to think about this because I know 4 people and 3 people don't like me. And so I don't know who you want me to talk to. I don't have friends. Like, and then he was like, no, you're going to do this. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know I said I'd do anything, but this is weird. And I'm a nurse. Like, I've never done anything like this. And I ended up on Josh Monday's show, Christian Conspiracy Podcast. And I was just like, 1 visit, and then it turned into 2 and 3 and 4. And he said, you know what, you should just start your own show. And I was like, yeah, I kind of been told that before. I was like, dang, I guess so. Guess I'll do that. Oh, well. So here I am. God was right. I was wrong. That usually is the way it goes. So
it's how it goes. And I had no desire to be a podcaster at all. And I don't know if you've even said this on the show or not, but I didn't even listen to podcasts. So I wasn't even a podcast listener. No,
my gosh.
was a musician and I enjoyed, you know, creative arts of all kinds. And it wasn't I was against podcasts. It just wasn't something I really got into. And then really when Tony Merkel connected with me was when I started listening to podcasts. And it's funny, the first 2 podcasts I ever listened to was Tony Merkel's and Isaac Weishaupt. So those are the first 2 that I ever listened to. And then I started obviously listening to a lot of different ones. Right. And I still had no desire to really podcast. And Tony kept telling me, he's like, man, you should probably podcast. Like, all right. And then I went through a couple years where I was with one podcast and then I was featured on a bunch of podcasts. And finally I decided to start my own, which now I enjoy a lot because I kind of do my own thing, talk about what I want to and bring on the people I want to. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. for sure.
That's what I love in your brain. Like, okay, I'm sure you're this way because I've listened to some of your podcasts. So I'm like, okay, once your brain starts doing crazy things like this, and you can't just talk to normal people like this, okay? Like, you have to be able to talk to some people. And my husband's great, but he's like, that Nephilim stuff is scary. Like, miss me with that. Like, he does not like it. And he doesn't like a certain other things in the occult stuff. And I'm like, okay, like, who am I going to talk to about this? And now that I have a podcast, I talk to everybody about it.
Yeah, it's great. It is such a exciting aspect about it because you can express all these thoughts that you have and at the same time do it in your way. And that's one of the things that I really set forth to do on this podcast was to talk about the weird stuff, go there, but at the same time not try to over sensationalize and then try to fear monger too, because there's a lot of that goes on with, a lot of people use it to boost monetary gains and things like that. And I try to not do that if possible. Now, if you find yourself being fearful with what I'm saying, that's not the goal. That's just, I might be hitting you with some reality too. Sometimes that's just part of it. Right. So, and today we're definitely going to talk about some interesting stuff and, specifically some angelic interactions. And I don't think that what Joseph Smith and Crowley had happened to them is anything new. It's been happening since the dawn of time. But I do think that the way that it happened to both of them was similar and then different at the same time. And I think that we'll start with you. For people that don't know Joseph Smith's story and how he was able to start this entire religion at 17, basically. So that's the wildest part about it. He was super young. And I think that if you could just break that down for people in a way that they can understand would be great to start this out. And I've talked extensively about Crowley on here, but obviously we'll bounce back and forth with some different things. Absolutely.
So Joseph Smith was an interesting character, and it all depends on what version you want to go with, because the church has 4 versions. They're not supposed to have 4 versions, but there are 4 versions nonetheless. And, Joseph was from a pretty magical family. I think that's really important for people to know because the church isn't going to tell you that. Their story is, we were from New York and we were poor farmers and nobody could read or write or anything. And I'm like, but that's not really true though. So, I mean, if you know the whole story, they actually have some statesman family members and they hail from Salem, Massachusetts. Okay. So, I mean, I could see why they didn't want that part in the story. And then you get to the grandpa's name and it's Azael. It's missing a Z. But I don't know that Christians name their kids almost Azazel. Okay. It's a lot. So I don't know what's exactly happening there. They're also supposed to be, Irish descent, but we've got a Solomon and Lucy, his mom. Solomon is her dad. That's Lucy's his mom. I'm just like, these names sound interesting to me. And if you really get deep into it, and we probably will today about this bloodline, they're undocumented, they're unpapered, they just don't know, but it's possibly, Irish. I'm like, you run 23andMe, church, like, get it together. Like, tell us what it is. You should have percentages like you gave me, but no, they just completely want that wiped off, and so I think it's interesting to know, that they kind of hide stuff all the time. And to find the background that I'm giving you, you have to go under his uncle, Jesse. So that's how you find it, because the church doesn't make it easy. And so, Joseph was confused about what church he should join. He's in the burned over district at this point. There's like revivals every other day. I mean, he's just getting complete religious, encompassing. And he does go and pray in a grove of trees. This is the church story, and it's close anyways in all the 4. So he goes and prays to ask which church he should join. And it said, a fit of darkness came over him. Now, if you've studied anything about Muhammad, you're stopping right here. You're like, oh, and it seemed like he was seized and couldn't like come out of it. And he sees God the Father and the Son. They're two different people. And in the church, with the LDS church, they're three. The Holy Ghost is separate also. But he just saw God the Father and the Son this day. And they told him to join none because they were going to help him and he was going to make a church, basically. And
I got a quick question about that.
Yeah.
So you were talking about, and I read this recently because I just did a show on the Trinity, and I was talking about Arianism and their thought patterns on how that they don't believe in the Trinity, right? So there's a large portion of people that don't believe in the Trinity in the way that the Roman Catholic Church first initially came out with the idea of the Trinity. And I did read that Mormonism was one of those that does not believe in that. They actually believe they're three separate beings.
Entities. Mm-hmm.
So explain that a little bit, since you come from that church
Sure.
environment. How do they explain that?
They literally say God is the Father, and this is going to get okay. If there's kids listening, turn it off. Like, I don't know that this is the best episode for you. I'm going to be careful how I say this. That Jesus was made the same way any other man was made. Okay, with passions and all of it. We'll just say it like that. And so they literally believe that act was created to create Jesus. And then Jesus is a completely separate person. And the Holy Ghost is like, completely separate from that as well. Like, that's a spirit. And so it never had a body. It's more, etherical, not an angel, just a spirit, not a dead person spirit, just like, I guess, like a soul mostly. And so that can influence your life. And you can feel they say this all the time. This is such a Mormon thing to say, the burning in the bosom. If you get the burning in the bosom, it's true, right? But actually not so much, because there's some warnings about that in the Bible. But anyways, that's what they say. And so for the listeners, they truly believe that these are three separate things and that they never come together ever, and never did. Like, they didn't start that way. They didn't break apart. None of that business. None of the apple and pieces, and no, none of that. So, and that's just how I always thought it was, and it makes sense because, Mormons call God Elohim, which is so interesting, and it's going to come up today. And so it makes sense, but also it leads you into a whole nother thing, because you're talking like the B'nai Elohim? Are you talking, you know what I mean? Like, what are you exactly talking about? And so when we talk about spirits and angels are people, like they're spirits. They were never here on earth. Okay. They never had a body. They never lived here on earth. They're God's creation before us. And so they can't be a dead guy. Joseph Smith is going to see a dead guy very soon after this whole meeting with God the Father and the Son. He goes home and he has another vision in his bedroom. And he sees an angel. He says it's an angel, Moroni. Some people call him Moroni. It's not, it's Moroni. And it looks like Moroni, like macaroni, but it's not. Some people say moron with an I. I get it. I was there. Yeah. Anyway, so Moroni shows up and he's like, hey, I'm this angel, but I used to be alive and I was over this tribe. And, I was this valiant soldier of this tribe and I died here and I hid these plates and they're really important. I'm going to give them to you so that you can write this book. And it's really important. It's similar like the Bible. Okay, we have multitudes of problems here now, because the Bible says, even if an angel comes down and gives you another book, it's a no-go. It's literally in there, it says, no, it's just the one, that's all. So right there, we got a problem. Second part, this is a dead guy.
And to that point, one of the things that I kept coming across was when Moroni was dictating to Joseph, he would give him rewrites of verses in the Bible where it would be like a different version of a verse that was in the Bible, which I thought that was fascinating, that there was this angel that was literally changing verses in
Right.
the Bible to Joseph Smith. And I thought that would have been one of the biggest red flags ever, was that the Bible itself was being changed by another entity that,
Which it can't be. Yeah.
right.
No. And so as a Mormon person, this is what they're going to tell you, because you said you've had some instances with them. I used to be one of these. Well, the Bible's only correct in as much as it's translated correctly. And that's how they talk, unless they're boys. And then they talk, they have a sing-song voice, but that's fine. And so it's very interesting that they literally will say the Bible's incorrect, but the Book of Mormon isn't. And I'm like, okay. Also, there's never been any historical evidence that this war happened, that this angel's telling him about. There's nothing. They won't dig up the hill. In fact, they've made sure to plant tons of trees now so no one can dig it up, because it's, earth guarded and you wouldn't want to hurt the trees and all that stuff. So, it would be simple to just say, yeah, let me dig it up. Like, there's supposed to be all these dead bodies here. Like, let's find some. No, none of that. And so it's a hard sell, but all of us that grew up in it, we don't know that. We just know that this is what we've been told from the time we were little kids. And it is literally in there so ingrained that if anybody comes at you, you're just like, oh, that's anti-Mormon propaganda. I don't talk to people that talk like that, or I don't listen to people like that. Like, like, quit talking to me. And you just don't. And people always say to me, you were in this for so long, 34 years. And I'm like, I know, because your whole family does it. Even when it's probably not quite right, which we'll get to it when we get to the temple. I definitely knew I wasn't where I should be. It didn't matter. My whole family was there. Like, my whole family was like, best day of your life, right? And I'm like, no, not so much. And people are like, well, they ask if you want to get up and leave, right? And I'm like, right. So you're going to do that in front of everyone. I mean, I think I would have rather died then, honestly. Now I'd have ran, but I wouldn't have gone. I wouldn't even be there. No. But like, at that time in your life, like, it is so much pressure, and it's crazy. Like, people can't understand that aren't in a cult, and it is a cult. Yeah. Fortunately. So,
for sure.
Yeah, you just want to make everybody happy, and you want to do the things that you're supposed to do. You want to be a good Mormon person. You don't want to make waves, any of that. So, and actually, I already was making some waves because I worked outside the home, because I became a nurse. And so already, like, I've got like one strike against me, right? So I'm not trying to make any more waves. Like, I was just trying to do what I was supposed to do, get my Jesus jammies and move on. But, yeah, we'll get there. So Moroni tells him that and it's funny, the description he gives. He says he was a Native American, but now he was exceedingly white. He makes sure to tell us that Moroni is now all the way white. And this is going to be important later. But he's there and he tells him where to go. And then eventually he tries to go. And every year for years, this thing just messed with him. And I say thing because I don't think this was anything good. Just like John Dee and Edward Kelley, just like we're going to talk about Crowley and Awas, just like Muhammad, like all of these things that come to people, especially when they want you to do something weird, which it gets weird, right? I mean, for all of them, when it starts dictating sexual things, you're like, should we really be listening to this? Like, I don't think so, because John Dee's wife got pregnant. And the whole Jack Parsons thing, he blows up, and, Crowley's just all over the place with his sexual stuff. And we've got Joseph with polygamy and he dies. And we've got Muhammad and he's with an 8-year-old child bride. I don't think any of that is sanctioned by God. I just don't.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's tough for people who follow these religions, because they don't really know the history. And
Right.
when you try to present the history, which I rarely do, because I'm not here to try to convince
Black
anybody
pillar.
of anything.
Yeah.
But if you did try to convince somebody of something like that, they would just say you're lying. I mean, most people don't have the wherewithal to actually dig into what they believe. And I think for me, that was something that I grew up in a Christian home, and my dad's great. And he's a great Christian man to this day. He's been a pastor, still pastors. He's 75. And I left and spent 20 years of my life, following Gnostic roads and occult roads and Freemasonry and all these things. And the part of it that when you come back and you start going through the scripture and going through these things in a deeper manner, you start understanding it a lot more than you did when you were first in it. And I think for me, that's why I've gotten recently so much in apologetics and just trying to understand the scripture in a way that I didn't before. I find it fascinating. I find it fun too, because I'm able to present what people think are fallacies in the scripture and show how it actually works, especially when you're looking at the Hebrew and the Koine Greek translations, and you're able to show that it's not, especially when people are very apt to take a verse out here and there to prove a point, and they're not looking at context, or they're not looking at the
cherry picking.
For sure. And Christians
that's
do it
the
too.
Mormon. That's the Mormon thing. Like if you get cornered in a room and you do have a debate. Now, I'm like you. At first, when I came out of it, I'm like, oh my gosh, no one must know this, right? Like you're a complete idiot. Like you're like, oh my gosh, I got to save these people and tell them all about these things. And they're like, oh, this crazy person. And especially with religion. And so you eventually find out, no, they know, and they know all the deep, dark secrets, and they know everything about it, and they know how to counteract it too. And so you don't want to have that fight. My in-laws are still in 110%. Only my mom is out. Like the rest of my whole family, and just my mom and my kids are out. Everybody else is still in. We don't talk about this at dinner, like at all, ever. They know I do a podcast because somebody found it. I did not put this on my normal socials, like anything. I tried my best to be like, you're not going to want to see that,
Right.
And it came up because somebody found it on their own in the family on TikTok, of all things. And I'm just like, it is what it is. Like, probably don't watch that. Like, I'm not trying to hurt you. You're at where you're at, but this is what I know. And that's why it's so important to me. Usually I bring slideshow and I will when I go on to see Tony, because I don't want to like ruin, we're talking about something else. So I'm like, okay, if I'm ever going to get people that maybe are 1 foot in and 1 foot out, or they probably wouldn't have found me, right? Is show them proof. Come at them like you would want as a believer back then. Like go backward in my brain. And so I was like, I have to have like this proof to show them that it isn't just this guy was a bad guy, or Warren Jeffs, slept with all these, and he did, like 12-year-old. Like it's not good. And, my sister married his nephew. So we know that's true. But like all of this weird stuff that happens, they know that part. They don't want to hear it because that just hurts them. And that's all you're going to cause. The occultic end of it, this is where I got surprised. When I kept having it on my heart to like study this, I was like, I don't read books like that. No. And it kept coming like over and over. And I was like, I don't know what's happening here. Like, I don't want to look at that stuff. That's scary. That's the first thing you hear. Right. And so then I finally read this quote when I was kind of searching things up, and it said, if you don't want to learn about the occult wants to learn a whole lot about you. And I was
absolutely.
Huh. So, yeah. And, Juan was one of the people I really listened to a lot when I first started like getting into things, and like, what even books do you check? Like, what? I don't even know what to do. And so, I started learning, and I'm like, oh, that's why I would have never understood what Joseph Smith was doing if I hadn't read about John Dee. I would be completely lost. Like, there's no way I could understand it, because Joseph Smith was scrying to translate. And so, I don't even know for sure if there were gold plates per se, but he did go there. And I will say this, and I think it was on the confessionals, this guy's story that talked about running in the woods, and he had a sigil to Baal tattooed on him. And he said, and this thing turned in from a frog to a person. And I was like, nope, that is Joseph Smith all day long. Holy crap. I was like, I turned it up. I was like, this is whoa. So I sent it to a bunch of people that I knew because that is exactly what Joseph says happens one of the times he goes to see these plates on the fall equinox in the middle of the night, dressed in all black. For years, he does this. And he's not worthy for one reason or another. And one time he tries to grab him and this frog turns into a man and punches him in the face. So, there's some parallels. And when you start learning about witchcraft and witches' familiars and you start learning things, you start to understand more. But I had no clue that I didn't think that was real. The first thing we say as Mormons, we say, no, that's the salamander stories. Oh, I think I took it upstairs. There's a book about the salamander story. And it was a complete fake, but yet I think it was kind of the church pre-gaming because they knew this story was going to come out. It's a little too close.
Interesting.
But that's Mark Hoffman. He was I don't know if you read about him, but at like late 80s-ish, he was actually he's in jail for murder, prison, and he bombed a bunch of people. He was like an antiquities dealer, and he was like getting all these papers from the church, and they said he hated the church and he was against it because he didn't believe. So he wrote this lie about a salamander and Joseph Smith. And I'm like, wait, I know that story. It's true. It's a frog, which is worse because if you know your occult history, salamanders are forged by the fire. They don't die and can make it through the flame, right? But frogs are always saddled with witchcraft. And so I was like, I know this story. It's actually true. But if you tell that to a Mormon, nope. Mark Hoffman, that's a lie.
Well, interestingly enough, Crowley had a ritual, the Cross of the Frog, and while he was here in the States, and he crucified this frog on a mini cross and tried to invoke spirits from that. And it's interesting too because of his background, his connections with Egyptian deities.
Yes.
So when you've got Keck and some of these other frog-headed gods, he was trying to do this while he was in the States. So that is another connection between this frog deity that seems to pop up with a lot of these high-end occultists who are trying to either find who their guardian angel is or just trying to manipulate demons to do tasks for them, which Crowley tended to do a lot. I want to jump to Kirtland really quick because you were talking about Moroni and the scrying and, Joseph knows he gets direction, right, to go to Kirtland and set up this first temple, which I believe it was in 1830s is when he set up this temple. And I actually went there. So part of this new documentary I got coming out towards the back end of this year, we went to Kirtland, and really crazy how this, and I'm not going to give anything away really, but I don't mind telling people the overarching things. The documentary is about Crowley and his connection to a specific cryptid, melonheads. So I found this weird connection a couple years ago. I started going down some really deep research to try to bring all this together. And as I'm doing it, Joseph Smith keeps popping up. And I'm like, why is he in
the Mormons
areas?
Here? Yeah.
It was crazy because Kirtland is one of the locations of the Melonheads. That is one of the 3 locations of these Melonheads. And not only that, but Kirtland is just rife with so much supernatural activity. You had the whole incident with the Mormon leader who killed all of the guys in the barn. Yeah. I actually went to the barn while I was there to check this out. There's a church that's built in front of it, a Protestant church now. They actually bought it and changed it. So we go to the temple, the first temple. Now, this is the temple where the day that it was built, according to Mormon lore, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're the Mormon, but
no more, but yes.
The day that it was, you can never leave. Like
that's what Thomas said. He's like, once a Mormon, you're never getting away from it. I'm like, man.
So the day that it's consecrated, there are all these angels that come into this temple and people see them. I mean, they are coming in and out of this temple, and there's this giant ball of light that comes and descends and hangs above the steeple of the temple. Now, some people, a lot of your ufologists and a lot of your ancient alien theorists believe that this was a UFO that came down and floated above the temple. Now, I'm not against that idea at all. I think angelic beings and what we would consider UFOs have a well-documented relationship with each other. So I don't throw that out of the possibility. Now, is this some sort of mechanical device, or is this something spiritual, holy? I don't know. We'll never know, but we don't know what this ball of light was. But during this period of time, within these set number of days, I think it was about a week, Joseph Smith meets with Moses, Elijah, and Jesus. And that's even wilder to think about, that all this happened in Kirtland right there. And so this is the thing I wanted to ask you about. I told you off air before we came on air. So we're shooting in front of this temple. We pull up and we're running gun styling because it's getting late and we wanted to get that nice dusk shot. And I'm walking up where he's shooting me, but you can see the temple behind me, and I'm talking about the murder that happened and some of these other things. Out of nowhere, these like two old people just come. I mean, it's like they just appeared. I don't even know where they came from. They just come walking down the street.
You're like, hey.
So they start taking pictures of the temple. So I'm like, okay, maybe they're sightseeing. Maybe they're Mormons from somewhere else that are visiting. But it was just weird, right? They didn't drive up. They walked from somewhere. We don't know where they came from. So I'm trying to record, but I'm having a tough time because they're right there.
You're like, because I want to leave now.
So I'm trying to wait till they get somewhere else, because at this temple, it's really interesting the way it's set up. So to the left of it, if you're looking at the front of it, there's all of these. It looks like a cemetery, but it's not really a cemetery. I think some of it is, but there's all of these statues
obelisks.
And stuff.
Are they obelisks?
Those are there for sure. But there was definitely some statues and things that were around, some in the back. So we kind of wait till they move, and we start recording again, but then they come back. And then all of a sudden this lady comes across the street and just stands next to us, taking pictures. But she takes like 100 of the same shot. So now I'm thinking
of you guys.
No,
this is so weird.
Temple.
Okay.
So, but it's like she's listening to hear what I'm saying.
Right.
She knows we got a camera out in front of a Mormon temple. What we thought in retrospect is they're Mormons. We think they're Mormons, and they saw us out there, and they're probably trying to disrupt whatever we were doing if it was something against Mormonism, which I think they were trying to pick up on, because that's why they kept getting close and they'd walk away. And then I got quiet when she came across the street, and she just sat there, and we just sat there. And finally, after about 5 minutes, she's like, "Oh, am I in the way?" Yeah, you're in the way. You just blocked my way to walk. So they moved. We ended up finishing filming, but crazy enough, as soon as we're done filming, more people start pulling up, and it's like they're looking at us directly. And I told Ward, I was like, man, we probably need to get out of this particular
go now.
area.
The Danites are here. Oh my gosh. I don't know.
So my question is, what do you think? Do you think there are probably, I don't know how it works within the infrastructure of the church. Are there people that look out for things like this that are trying to harm the church?
Yes, there is security. I think possibly that might have been owned at that time by the Reformed Church, the RLDS, but now the regular, and this gets confusing, the regular LDS, I think, have reacquired it. But at that time, it possibly was the Reformed Church. But yes, they have. And when I joked and said the Danites were like Joseph's personal army of people that killed people when you did something wrong, because they believed in blood atonement. And actually, the reason why Utah is one of the last states that still has a firing squad for you to die is because blood atonement is a real thing for Mormons. And this is not a part of their history they really like out there. And I don't know if you've seen Primeval yet. Have you seen this show?
I haven't seen it.
Oh, you have to watch it because, okay, throw the love story out, chuck that thing out. It's whatever. I know I'm not a normal girl, but it's not true. The love story part's crap and the rest of it's pretty good. And it talks a lot about like the Brighamites and the Danites, but they literally they called them their God squad. And if you were today to go to, well, it might not be as bad anymore, but back in the day when you would go to FLDS communities, they would literally chase you out of town with guns and drive behind you and you would have to run for your life. And I'm not talking in the 80s, like I'm talking in 1998, like it's not that long ago. And they would protect themselves and they will spill non-innocent blood. And the reason why I told you to watch Primeval is there's something called the second anointing. And this is deep in the church theology, but the second anointing, funny enough, it's a patriarchal society, which this will go along with Crowley here soon. But at the top, what nobody talks about is the last blessing you can ever receive that's like going to move you up a step, okay? It's called the second anointing. It's called making your place sure. It literally means short of murder that isn't good murder. We'll talk about that in a second. You can do nothing wrong that you will not make your way to the celestial kingdom. Like you are literally promised a place in heaven. And the weird part is for every other blessing you've ever gotten in your life, okay, as a kid, growing up, whatever, it's a man. We all know as a woman that the 12-year-old boys have more authority than we do. Okay, that's real. And we are not allowed to do any kind of blessings like that. We can pray, but we don't do hand-laying blessings, okay, by the Melchizedek priesthood or the Aaronic priesthood or any of that. Women don't have the priesthood, but they used to. But we can talk about that here in a minute too. But the last blessing you get on that second anointing, you do parts of it in the temple, then you go home. Tell me if this doesn't sound so curly. To your marital bedroom, and your wife gives you that blessing. Now, are they saving the divine feminine for the last hoorah, right? This is like, to me, after reading what I've read, I was like, oh my gosh. They've always told us like there was a mother in heaven. They tell us this all the time. They don't talk about her name because she's so sacred, but yet there's a mother in heaven and we all know it. And so I'm like, oh, this makes so much sense, right? Like, I mean, they're literally channeling this divine feminine energy. And if you've ever talked to a Mormon man, I mean, you seem like you go to the gym and you're like a manly guy. They're not like that usually. They're very, well, I call them pointy shoe wearers for the most part, right? I mean, nothing against business guys, but they cross their legs fully over like a girl when they sit like all the way. And they're not very manly. They actually use it to come off as like, I'm this nice person. If you ask anyone about Mormons, they'll say, that girl's crazy. Mormons are the nicest people we know. Right. So how am I ever supposed to tell you anything about them?
Right.
Like it doesn't work.
That's very interesting about this divine feminine aspect, because I've been getting to that a lot with a lot of Gnostic research.
Yes.
And just the idea of Sophia from Neoplatonism and Plato and what he considers wisdom. Like the divine feminine is wisdom. And
yes.
I wonder if that's really what this being is that's going on in Mormonism as well.
Well, what if Joseph wasn't looking for golden plates? What is gold in theosophy? It's wisdom. What is gold in like Masonry? It's wisdom and knowledge and the pursuit of that, right? Like doing the good work, right? Same thing with Crowley. All this stuff. I'm like, when I was studying this and doing this comparison side by side, I'm like, what if that's what this is about, right? Is this divine knowledge? And I don't know if you've ever seen Joseph's parchments. They're very occultic, extremely occultic. Well, you probably saw my show with Juan, and so you can see on there that they're not normal. There's some Enochian language, there's different things. And I personally, like if I were to weigh in on this, honestly, I mean, people don't like to like accept the fact that there are demons in our world and like scary things. And if you talk to a Jewish person, they'll lay it on you. They say there's more demons If you could see them, they're like everywhere, all the way around us all the time. And, when you're calling out for something, which I know Joseph was doing, because he was calling out on the fall equinox to this spirit to reach out to him, which, by the way, I believe he was not a Freemason only. I feel he was a Martinist, because they are a practicing order, right? A regular Freemason, like you said, it's like this brotherhood, and you go to dinner and stuff. Like they're not, practicing magic. They're not putting on robes and, got wands and stuff. Like that's not how it is.
Depends
But
on
with,
how high you go.
right. And with Joseph, though, it is. And so, like,
Right.
and Brigham, who follows him, like, we're talking about talismans and bloodstones and crazy stuff. Not crazy, but like, it's not normal Christianity. That's all. And I think,
and
yeah,
I've
he
seen a
channeled.
lot of parallels in Mormonism to the infrastructure of Freemasonry, even just
Yes.
getting to the different
Well,
levels.
He was
is
a master
very
mason.
similar.
Yeah. He was. Yeah. Do you know
For
he
sure.
achieved his master masonry in one day? He was elevated to master mason overnight. He told
They'll
them
do
something.
that too, depending on
Yeah.
who it is. If they're
Bloodline.
trying to get you from A to Z quickly, they'll get you through the rituals pretty quick. I know for me that my time was cut in half because I was so proficient with the knowledges, and
Right,
most of
if
the
you
guys
know
that come in
stuff.
there aren't in it for that. So they're just trying to, get into fraternity.
Doing the
I
shapes.
was trying to get to the knowledge. So, they did actually cut mine in half. I got done really, really quickly to
But
get to
overnight,
Master Mason.
almost unheard
It wasn't
of.
overnight though. Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah,
That's
Master
like a whole
Mason
other level.
overnight. And I'm like, okay. And then I was talking to Thomas, do you know Paranoid American? You know who
Yeah.
I'm talking about? Okay. So he's a 32nd degree. And he told me, he's like, that's not normal. We talk about, Mormonism all the time. And he said, but the Scottish Rite doesn't land correctly. He's the one that kind of steered me into looking a little bit further. He's like, everybody blames Scottish Rite, but honestly, the time frame is way off, because it was like only really in full-fledged swing, maybe 50 years, and it wasn't started in America. Like it would have to get here, And so I was like, well, how would he know Martinism then? Like, how would he know this? And then I found out about Lumen Walters, and that changes the world. Like Lumen Walters gets skipped on. And first of all, like, let's do the name. How about Lumen, like light bringer? Like, come on, And this guy was a supposed well-traveled doctor, and he had just come back from France. Well, Martinism, France, he's like super rich. Like, he's probably in these circles, and he liked Joseph Smith. He saw something in him. Now, I personally believe that there's a lot of really heinous stuff that happened behind the scenes, like including digging up his dead brother for this whole thing. And, the current prophet's a member of Skull and Bones in Utah, which is the only place that's ever been set up and sanctioned by Yale. Sanctioned. So when you're talking about these things, this isn't normal Christianity anymore. You're talking about channeling and all these things. And when you look at the parchments, he's specifically channeling, like, it's the intelligences of, well, what does that mean? I'm sure but the listeners probably don't. What does an intelligence mean when you hear that?
Are we talking about entity-wise and intelligence?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
like
it
spooky.
depends on what group that you're talking to. So if you're talking to Crowley's group, the Golden Dawn, that would be the Secret Chiefs.
Yeah, that.
And the Mahatmas is another name for them. Some people call them the Astral. I think Astral Chiefs is another one too. There's several different ones.
The intelligences
beings,
are diamond ions, right? They're the lower level. So those are the higher level, like possibly, maybe Moroni. I don't know for sure if he was like a true HGA. But even then, they say the whole reason why you want to find out your HGA, which is your holy guardian angel, okay, is to find out your demon too. Like it's not just like it's your diamond ion. It's not a demon per se, but it can be, right?
Right.
And when we look at what he started calling himself, Joseph later refers to himself as Barak Al. Well, That's interesting because he was at minimum a fallen angel, and at maximum it's a pretty bad sitch. And you go to the Book of Enoch, and of course they don't want us to read that. And people always think that Mormons do. No, they don't. They don't encourage that. And so anyway, he was supposedly a ninth watcher of the 200 fallen angels, and he gets kicked out for lust. And now he's known as the demon Asmodeus. Well, that's a pretty serious demon if you know about your demons. And so it makes sense to me, knowing what we know now about Joseph and how he's going to start messing around with not just women that he marries, he's marrying other men's wives. That's not done in polygamy. Not now. Not ever. Like that's polyandry. And so polyandry was never practiced or sanctioned by the Mormon Church, even though Joseph did it. So
that's interesting about Barakael too, because he taught astrology in the Book of Enoch, which is very interesting.
He got in trouble for teaching it to man.
Absolutely.
And so, have you seen on the temple? Did you? I don't know if you noticed. Probably it's kind of hidden in plain sight, if that makes the best sense. But there's cloud stones and moonstones and all of these things on the temple. But one thing that people rarely see is the Big Dipper. The Big Dipper is on every single temple. And if you know what that signifies, where Joseph Smith says he is the bloodline of Jesus Christ. I don't know if you know this. So he says he's the Merovingian bloodline and that he's the 13th bloodline. And this is super blasphemous, just so people know, like this is not good. And even Fritz Springmeier talks about this. And it's said that 13th bloodline is actually the bloodline of Lucifer. And I find it interesting that they cannot find the background on his parents. They say, oh, we don't know. They're undocumented. Bull crap. You run 23andMe. What do you mean? What do you mean you don't know? Like where these people came from.
I did not know that he claimed to be from the Merovingian line. That's something I didn't know.
Did.
That's very interesting because the Merovingian line has always coming up in every conspiratorial corner there is. And, obviously the thought pattern is that they are hiding the bloodline of Christ. Yes. And of course, we know the Da Vinci Code and all those things.
Yeah, it gets wild. But for the Merovingian line, do you know what they consider super important is the bee. And what is Utah? The beehive state. And what do we have on our flag? We have a beehive. And so when you look at this stuff, like Napoleon was so into this that he attached golden bees on his frock when he got ordained king. So like this was serious to them. And I have to tell you, like my background, which I've only recently bit the bullet and I was like, screw it. I'm going to sign into the stupid Mormon.com because, I already spit in the cup. So we may as well. I was an idiot.
They already got me.
Oh, yeah. They know who I am. I'm like, it's whatever. I mean, if they're going to get me, I feel like it would have already happened. Right. I've got too big of a mouth, or maybe, that bloodline thing. But like, I'm just saying my family line, as I started looking upwards, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is weird. And so I am directly like House of Bourbon, House of Orleans. I'm like related to Marie Antoinette. Like why was and so I look it up like this and not that far up either, like only my great grandpa. And so I'm like, why the hell did he come to Utah? Why would he come here and be a poor farmer? Because that's what ends up happening. And he's following the Mormon stuff and he gets baptized and comes here and he gives up all his rights to the throne and everything, even though he started at like a whole town in Australia. I mean, it's or South Africa. It's this really cool story, but I'm like, why would you come here then? That makes zero sense and be this poor farmer unless you thought you were going to be paid back in heaven, right?
That's very, very interesting.
The bloodline. Like if you're going to say you're a Merovingian, do you want to mate with just anybody? Because I'll tell you something. The Kingston bloodline, their polygamy bloodline, okay, of FLDS people that still do polygamy today, they still say they are the bloodline of Jesus Christ and that they only marry each other. They marry their brothers and sisters and like their aunts and uncles to the point where they're super rich and they back all of the people that like go and run in Senate and like all the state and all the things in government. So they've took some of their money and hired a geneticist to actually help them like be able to procreate without screwing everything up. So
wow, that is fascinating
yeah,
that they've
it
got a
gets
geneticist
bananas.
on deck to help out. And then you wonder like what they're mixing in the petri dish as they're trying to keep these bloodlines whole, but at
Pure.
the same time,
Yes.
not have all of this weird things
Genetic
happen.
problems.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And they
that
do
is
have that. Yeah.
wild.
It gets, and you know, if that was back in the day, like, okay, I told you a crazy story. No, that's today. That's
Yeah.
right now. We're talking about today. And I'm like, they don't even look like polygamists per se. They like, we call them pligs in Utah. I know this is like rude, but this is real. Okay. Everybody calls the polygamous people pligs because they wear like Little House on the Prairie stuff. Like when my sister married, he was out, Warren Jeff's nephew, his kids came to the wedding and they turned around and wouldn't talk to us and shunned us. And they had their full like Little House on the Prairie stuff on and everything. Like they don't, it's like Goyim. Like they don't talk to you. Okay. You're going to hell. Don't talk to me. And so this is very much how they normally are. But this Kingston line, they just wear long sleeves and they just wear like a high collar and like jeans. They look quote unquote normal. You know, they don't stand out in the crowd. So they blend very well into society. And I do believe they're like owners of a mainstream gas station type stuff here, which makes them oil barons. And that gets into a whole disaster mess. We won't go there right now, but like the Mormons are always going to pop up. Like how you said, why is Joseph Smith popping up? The Mormons are always popping up. Like every time I turn around, I'm like, I was studying something else. Why are the Mormons here? You know, like,
right. I mean, that's how the documentary went with me. We had no clue. We weren't even planning on doing anything about Joseph Smith. And then it just happened that it connected. And then we reached out to Isaac and he's in Salt Lake and he's like, hey, we got this place called Gilgal Gardens here. And I was like, well, I know about the Gilgal Rephaim over in the Middle East. And I was like, this is like a Nephilim garden. You literally walk in the garden and there's a giant with a sword when you walk in right there. And he's standing there with this giant sword, like in a rock, and it says Gilgal. And then when you walk in this garden, because the garden was made by a member of the church, and the city ended up buying it from them. Even though the house is not owned by the city, it's still owned by the people that built the garden, but the garden itself is public property now. So we walk in the back to this garden, and it's the most Freemasonic thing I've ever seen in my life. They had a wheelbarrow that was built in the shape of the square and compass. They had the spears behind it that it was perfect. And then you had the pillars of Boaz and Yakin right there. And Isaac and I and Tony walked right through it. We knew exactly what it was. We just started looking around. I was like, this is the wildest thing I've ever seen in my life. And it was such a huge connective piece to Crowley because we were already going to Kirtland. And then we hear about this just crazy. There was a lot of Mormon infighting in Kirtland too, which was really wild that I had done some research on. Not only the fact was Joseph Smith ran out of town at one point early on, obviously. And this is kind of where, you know, he was ostracized by a lot of Protestants at the time. And this is why Crowley loved his story so much, because Crowley hated Christianity. And we're going to kind of slip gears into Crowley a little bit here. But Crowley just was absolutely against it to the fullest. And I've talked about it on this show. And, you know, his father being killed by what was called the Plymouth Brethren, which he was a part of, and his father and his mother. And he wasn't killed in the sense of they just outright murdered him, but he had mouth cancer. And they said, hey, we've got this experimental technique, electric technique that'll help with the power of God. And of course it didn't work. And all he had to really do was go to a physician. They would have cut it out and he would have been fine. And he died when Crowley was 8. And so Crowley gets super angry and blames Christianity. That was the moment that he viewed himself as Horus. He viewed the Church of Christianity as Set, killing his brother Osiris. And so this was this whole machination that he created as a child growing up. As a matter of fact, his mother, who he didn't get along with at all, called him the Beast when he was a kid. So that's where he really got the name the Beast from. It wasn't from his inner workings within occultism. It was actually from his mother calling him that. And then he just like embodied that. But you were talking about the Holy Guardian Angels or the HGAs, and you got to get into Crowley in the Book of the Law, because that's where the parallels come with Crowley and Joseph Smith. And in 1904, he goes with Rose Edith Kelley, who was his wife at the time, and he ran through many wives. You know, he wasn't a polygamist in the sense of he had a bunch of wives, but Crowley had a lot of wives.
Yeah. He drove them all crazy.
And Crowley liked the other end of it too. He liked men too. So Crowley was into everything, which boded very well for him as a secret agent too, because he was able to do so many different things at once when he was in certain areas. You know, you would see these occult writings come out and these different occult rituals he was working. Well, while he was in these areas, if you connect the dots, there were highly volatile political things going on that he was a part of, that he helped work as well. So he has been searching for this HGA for a while. You know, Crowley hasn't got it yet. He's been trying to figure out the Abramelin ritual, which he had tried several times, as a matter of fact. The first time he tried it was in Boleskine, where, you know, the Loch Ness Monster is, and this is the house that he had. This is before he came to the States for the first time. And I bring that up several times because some people think that his first time in the States was 1914. It was actually 1900 when he first came to the States. He was only in there for a couple days. He went to Mexico for a while. He came back to the States, went to San Francisco for a little bit, went to Hawaii, and then he jetted out to the East. That's when he was spending time in Shanghai and all these other places. But he goes to Boleskine. He starts doing the ritual of Abramelin, the mage. And he gets to a point to where he's getting close, but he can't finish it. So he just stops. Well, the backstory that people talk about is the fact that he opened a portal while he was there. And some people think that is the Loch Ness Monster that he released. Right. Some people think it's some sort of demonic entity that he released when he was doing this, but he never closed it. He never actually finished the ritual. As a matter of fact, when he goes to Mexico, not long after that, he spends a good deal of time in Mexico. This is when he gets involved with the Scottish Rite Freemasons. He becomes a 33rd degree Freemason down there. And while he's there, he's trying to perfect this ritual of Abramelin while he's down there. And he still doesn't get it right, but he's invoking all of these other entities while he's down there. And he starts working with this, for all intents and purposes, it's a monk that's down there, a Mexican monk, and they start working together and they create this other secret society as well while they're down there. So all of these things are happening while he's in Mexico, and he's trying to invoke these angelic beings. It's all to get to this point of getting to Cairo with Rose Edith Kelley in 1904. And this is where initially he thinks he's trying to invoke Horus. And he finds out through Rose Edith Kelley, who's not even...
She's not into it, yeah.
At all.
Like,
she doesn't even like it. But because she's in such close proximity to him, that she ends up having visions, ends up getting told that Horus spoke to her, and essentially that Horus is not the one he's looking for. So through this, he ends up connecting with his holy guardian angel, Aiwass, and Aiwass dictates to him the book of the law, pretty much puts him through an automatic writing process, and he writes the book of the law. And this is when the 3 chapters come out, and you've got Knew It, Hate It, Rahar, Kuit. These are, each chapter is dedicated to these Egyptian deities, which I do think were Elohim or gods, or we could even say angelic beings. But he writes this book of the law, and from this book of the law comes Thelema. And this is the religion of Aleister Crowley. And this is why Aleister Crowley felt like he had so much in common with Joseph Smith. Now, I read something recently about Joseph Smith that I thought was pretty interesting. And the writer was saying that the difference between Crowley and Joseph Smith was that Joseph Smith would be in more of the prophet pantheon because he wasn't seeking this stuff out, but he was given this from these angelic beings, and Crowley was seeking it out through magical purposes. Now, that's just what the writer was saying.
Right.
I know that
Way disagree. Yep.
Joseph Smith's family was deep into folk magic. This is a provable fact. And they were very open to magical practices. So in my opinion, I think that the cover story was, I'm a prophet and I was given this, but I actually believe that Joseph Smith was just like Crowley. He was trying to invoke his holy guardian angel in a very similar way that John Dee and Edward Kelley did too. And I don't even put it out of the realm of possibility that Joseph Smith was very aware of John Dee and Edward Kelley and their writings, because there are a lot of Enochian symbols throughout Mormonism as well. So,
well,
and I think
not
Crowley
just
knew that.
Enochian. The thing about it is yes, there is Enochian, similarities there, but even higher, he was practicing Solomonic magic. And when we get into Solomonic magic, it isn't an accident. Okay. And also, you have to understand that he saw and interacted with 23 different apparitions, dead people, whatever you want to say, including like his dead brother and all these people, that it really shouldn't be that way. Even with our Mormon theology, it doesn't work like that. And so when you're talking about him actively going to the hill, dressed in all black, borrowing a black horse. We only know this stuff because his neighbors had to write affidavits because he got in trouble and ended up in court, so for glass looking, literally. And so he gets a ticket for this. And it was a big deal to like end up in court over it. It was like not that big a deal to do it, but to end up in court, it means you truly sucked at it, because like everybody was saying basically you're screwing people over, So he goes there every single year doing the same thing over and over and over, all dressed in black, certain time on the fall equinox. And if you know anything about Martinism, the spring and the fall equinox is the only 2 times where they can invoke certain things. And he has these symbols on these parchments calling out to specific things. And, when you talk about like, okay, how the restoration of the priesthood happens, they literally say that, to get the baptismal, workings, because nobody could lay it on them, right? Like John the Baptist comes and like visits him, and he ends up getting it, in the Susquehanna River. I don't know if you know that, but that's where he was baptized. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I just think he's in a hot zone of definite, like, other being activity. Like if you know anything about the Seance of the Nine and Andreja Puharovich and all this weird stuff later, like this area is a hot zone for this stuff. And again, what did they do? They contacted the 9 Egyptian gods. I think he tapped into that, but I also know this. He made, his little talisman, his Jupiter talisman, he made it wrong. And once you invoke your HGA, you have to seal. Everything in Solomonic magic is about sealing. Okay, there's tons of seals, there's just tons of them. And so when you're doing this stuff, you have to seal off the bad, once you get it all done, like you said, like leaving portals open. I don't think he sealed it, first of all. And I think this continues throughout the ages with Crowley, with the Nine, with all these people. And this is like a hotbed, for some reason. And the Susquehanna, plays into that.
Absolutely. And you were talking about Solomon, and it brings you back to Crowley's time in Mexico, which is just fascinating. So the monk, for all intents and purposes, his name is Don Jesus, and he and Crowley created this secret society called Lamp of the Invisible Light, which there we go with the light again,
Lumen. Yep.
Absolutely. But Crowley writes a book while he's down there called The Book of the Spirit of the Living God, which was published in 1901. And from that book, though, he produces 2 rituals. And in book 2, and it was called The Temple of Solomon the King. And he released these on the spring equinox, which Crowley was just like Joseph Smith, because he was very precise was when he put out his books, how long he took to write his books, especially when he wrote the equinoxes. He would spend 5 years in silence and then release one of the books. Well, you were just talking about those entities. And while he's down there, he starts invoking Abramellan's princes of the demons. Lucifer, Leviathan, Satan, Belial. These are the 4 princes. And then he invokes the 8 sub-princes: Astaroth, Maggot, Asmodee, Beelzebub, Orions, Paimon, Eraton, and Amion. And he says they're all subject to the will of the Lord of the universe. Now, this is when he's working with Don Jesus, who is a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemason, who brings him into Freemasonry while he's down here. And not only that, while he's performing these rituals to try to invoke his own personal holy guardian angel, which he still hasn't done yet, because we're not even in 1904 when he finally achieves his HGA, which is Iwas. He is invoking all these other entities. You think about it, he left this one portal open. How many other portals did he leave open? Right, because one of the things about occultists is there are places that are considered places of the divine.
Right.
One of those places would be deep caverns or caves. The Theosophists love to go into caves and meditate to a point they invoked entities. Other places are high places. People like to go to the top of mountains. And what was Crowley? He was a mountain climber. He was actually a
mountaineer,
professional mountain climber. And while he was in Mexico, that's all he did was mountain climb. As a matter of fact, he went by an alias while he was down there, O'Rourke, in the papers. So he didn't even go by his own name. He had a fake name while he's down there. I think it was more for his secret agent side.
Right.
But while he's down there invoking all of these entities, this is where he learns how to make himself invisible. So he talks about this. He talks about when he realized that he was able to do this, he put on the brightest coat he could, put on a crazy hat, walks down the street, and nobody saw him. And that's when he knew that he had crossed over into this new occult magic that he was able to unlock. So Mexico is a very important place for Crowley, but this was very in close proximity to America, and he was in and out of America early on during this time. Now, he was very aware of Joseph Smith, and my thing is to say that Joseph Smith's a prophet and he wasn't trying to invoke these things. I don't see how Crowley would have bought into him as much as if he really thought that. I think Crowley knew what he was doing, and Crowley paralleled himself to Joseph Smith because Crowley felt like he was persecuted. Everywhere he went, Christians were trying to take him down. And listen, Crowley was a very ornery individual too. So he rubbed people the wrong way, even other occultists like William Yeats. They butted heads a lot in the Golden Dawn. And even when he came over to the States, William Yeats was sending letters out to people that he worked with in the States. So they just had an ongoing rivalry and just butted heads this whole time. But I believe too that Crowley was able to achieve some of this magic some of these other guys weren't able to do. And I
Yeah.
am in the camp of, and I told Juan this recently, I was just on his show talking about Crowley being a secret agent. I think there were three sides to Crowley. I think Crowley was a charlatan, that people think that he was just this charlatan, that no, he wasn't an occultist and he wasn't a magician and all of these things. I think that was a part of him. I think he was very good at masking who he really was, and that plays into him being a secret agent. But I do think he was a master occultist. I think he knew magic very well, and I think he achieved some things that some people in his line of work could only dream to do. And I think that
magician recognizes magician, I feel.
Absolutely. And why would Crowley connect himself to Joseph Smith if he hated Christianity so vehemently and hated Jesus? Now, Joseph Smith talked about Jesus. Jesus was a big part of what he did, but Crowley never talked bad about Joseph Smith. He loved Joseph Smith for all intents and purposes. And you have to ask yourself, and this is why when I bring up Gnosticism, and sometimes I get missiles thrown at me by people who love Gnostic viewpoints, but I always point to guys like Crowley and Parsons and these guys who were deeply entrenched in Gnostic practices. Matter of fact, Crowley used to perform the Gnostic Mass. And here in a minute, I'm going to talk about some of the Gnostic magic that Crowley did in conjunction with his thoughts about Joseph Smith. So why are these guys so fascinated with this thing if it's good? It's just like Mormonism. Why is it that if it's so good, why are all these secret practices going on? Why do you have to keep going to this next level, this next level? It's the classic, you have to work to get to here, and then maybe you can achieve this. It's Faustian.
Carrot. It's Faustian because here's the thing. Crowley lost his child, which really screwed him up, even though people don't talk about that because I don't think they like to humanize him.
Lilith.
But it really messed him up. But also, people don't talk about, so I told you he's finally got the plates and dressed in all black and he has his new bride, okay? And all of this virgin scrying is going to end because he just got married, right? And so he gets his wife pregnant after this occurs. I think he'd been holding out. I can't prove that, but I think there was a situation there. And I think that whatever this entity was knew that this might be coming to an end. And that's why he did receive whatever he received that day, whether they be real plates or gold knowledge. I don't know what that is. However, his wife gets pregnant and their first baby is born severely deformed right after this. 9 months later, she has this baby and they name it his dead brother's, name, which by the way, his brother dies in the midst of him trying to do this, which was his dad's oldest son. So we've got, if you talk to people in the magical world, what is the biggest price that you can pay? It's your eldest son. And even better if it's a child. And so they both paid that price. His dad paid with his oldest son, and then he paid with his firstborn son. I don't think that was an accident, in my opinion.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with you. I think that was a ritual. I think that was
and a bargain.
Probably,
And the sex magic. I don't think that Joseph was just marrying these women. He had to do something to come off not looking like a scumbag. Really, he still did. But if you say marriage, plus he's wearing the Jupiter talisman and it's supposed to give you charisma and make people love you and all this stuff. So I think, it worked fairly well because I'll tell you, people that said they were livid with him could walk in a room with him and come out oh, buddy, he would charm the pants off people. And he has some quotes that if he is a prophet, tell me this, why would you say not even Jesus Christ could hold a church together like I did? Not even Jesus. That is not something you would say. Sorry.
I completely agree with you there. And I do think that this Abramelin ritual is somehow intertwined with Joseph Smith. Again, we don't know everything Joseph Smith did. And what I've learned about this Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage, which, by the way, Samuel Mathers, who was head of the Golden Dawn at the time when Crowley was brought in, he actually was the one that translated it into English. So he was the one that was pushing this ritual that Crowley picked up and was basically like, you guys don't know what you're doing. I'm going to figure it out. That's part of the reason, too, he had some beef with the guys in the Golden Dawn. But Mathers, and I got a couple of excerpts from the book itself, but they paint it as this picture of these HGAs as being the most holy, beautiful thing ever. And Mathers says, you shall see your guardian angel appear unto you in unequal beauty, who will also converse with you and speak in words so full of affection and goodness, and with such sweetness that no human tongue could express the same. That's Enochian. In one word, you shall be received by him with such affection. This description which I here give unto you shall appear mere nothing in comparison. So Crowley's reading this, and Crowley's like, I got to get a hold of this guardian angel, which he ends up doing. So the thought pattern was, and it's widely repeated, that Crowley failed at the Abramelin ritual. But it's the more you dig, he completed the ritual numerous times in different modalities. And if you see Crowley's ascent throughout his life, the more in tune with these beings he gets, you can tell that something's working. It's not that it's not working. It's not that he's not achieving it. And some of these writers that I read are deeply entrenched in the occult, and I do like to hear their perspective. And, one of the things that they talk about with chaos magic is that Crowley found the A to Z quicker than the actual ritual. So Crowley was able to figure out that, I don't need to do all of these things that are in this book. I just need to be able to find what pieces fit to get me there the quickest. And I think that, Crowley never finished the ritual per the book, but Crowley finished the ritual, and he did it multiple times.
His way, right?
Right, his way. And I do think that plays into Joseph Smith too, because Joseph Smith found what worked for him. He may have had a set steps that maybe was given to him by his family. We don't know everything that was going on there. It's like you said, it's a huge mystery.
Well, the one thing I do want to say is he got typhoid fever when he was young. And you mentioned Crowley having this complete, it's almost like a DID experience, right? When your parent dies or you have something horrible with your health or whatever. So Crowley had that with his dad passing, but Joseph got typhoid fever and it went into his bone, and he got osteomyelitis of the leg, and they had to cut it out. They were going to cut his leg off, and the mom was like, no. And she was a known healer. And actually what she proposed was better. And they just cut out the infected parts, but multiple times with no anesthesia. And these are supposedly, remember, poor farm people that have nothing, but she's calling doctors from Harvard to her house. Cool story. Her other son was there at Dartmouth. And so don't let people make you think he didn't have access. He did. What are you going to bring a laid up kid home to do? Probably read a book. Here's a book, weirdo. You like this weird stuff, And so at that time when he is healing, nobody mentions this. I didn't know this until maybe 7 months ago. He goes back with his uncle Jesse to Salem. And his great grandpa was part of the people that were actually killing witches in the Inquisition. Joseph Smith's great grandpa. So what's the best way to cover it up if you're involved in witchcraft? Go, she's a witch, that's what they did. It's proven. And so I just think that there were some things that family passed down when he went, and it would be the time where he kind of does a DID, because what does extreme pain, near death type stuff? He almost died, It's gonna make you more able to access, right? That's just, they're able to draw into that negative. So that's a weird sitch with them too. So
yeah, that's really wild. Like, yeah, I haven't heard some of this stuff about Joseph Smith.
it's deep. I think every time I go down the rabbit hole, like even when I was on WAN, like I know so much more now. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this is never ends. People are always like, oh, well, what will you talk about next? I'm like, don't worry about it. Mormons is the gift that keeps on giving. It goes into JFK, RFK, weird stuff. I'm like, no, I'll be fine. But it's fascinating because I'm like, this shouldn't, A plus B should not equal Howard Hughes. What? Like, and they're there every single time. And I'm like, what is happening? And I think, there was a lot of changes from Joseph's original heart at 14 to what became. And I think he was fooled. No less than John Dee. What do they say later? Even Crowley says it of AWAS. He says, he lied to me. Remember later?
Yeah.
He was pissed.
By the way, Crowley came out later and said that he's not sure if the Book of the Law was given to him by Iowas
or not
all along.
Yeah.
So that's the wild thing. Do you know when he was in New Orleans, Crowley got real sick and he got so sick to the point that Iowas told him that he was going to leave him and find a new vessel because his vessel was too weak for him and he needed to find somebody who was stronger. So Crowley got better and Iowas didn't leave him. Yeah, I think it was like
He's
a motivating
I gotta
factor.
get up. Oh my gosh. And it makes you wonder, like when you're talking about if I don't think this can happen if you're not messing with things. Okay. But if you're messing with things, and you are an open vessel because of some trauma or sickness, whatever that is, and you've been messing with things, you do not know what you're going to get because John Dee will tell you so. Like they literally thought they were doing something for God. And then they were like, oh my gosh, this is a nightmare. Like this is so bad. We have to stop now after 8 years of his life. I mean, and that's why he gave in with the whole wife thing because he's probably like, I don't want to do this, but like 8 years, every day.
I'll tell you an interesting theory, and this is off this subject a little bit, but this is one that'll pique your interest a little bit and maybe you look into it. So there is another theory going around that John Dee was actually the one manipulating Kelley.
Oh, Kelley. Oh.
And this was the classic, what you just said. Oh, the witch. We're actually the witches, but we're pointing the witches. That John Dee was actually the mastermind the entire time.
I actually think that already because he blackmailed Kelley to stay there once when Kelley tried to hightail it out of there because it scared him
all day long and all night.
And then he said it stabbed him with a sword or something. And he's like, I have to go back. Can you imagine? You have to go back because you're getting stabbed.
And he was another secret agent. John Dee worked for the Queen.
007. Yeah, he was the original. And that's why I think Crowley, did some of the copying he did there because he knew, And this goes even further back. If you go past John Dee and go to Al-Kindi, it even goes further back than that. Like this is nothing new under the sun. We're not, it's not. This is tapped into. And, by chance, by family, I don't know, but it's something.
Yeah, I want to talk about Moonchild because I brought it up to you earlier.
Yes.
And for people that don't know, it was written in 1917. And the novel, because it's a novel, and it's touted as a fictional work, but it was basically Crowley's way of telling a story of what was going on within the Order of the Golden Dawn. So he had sided with Samuel Mathers, who we just quoted earlier. He liked Samuel Mathers. But what he didn't like was the other side, which was Yeats and Arthur Waite and these guys. So he he shows all of these different leaders as a part of what he called in the book, the Black Lodge, and he lampoons all of these characters throughout. Anybody who's been attached to Crowley in his life, he puts in this book as a fictional character. Well, in this book, he starts talking about an enigmatic figure. And I'm going to read a little bit here and then I'll break it down.
Yeah.
Because you'll catch some of the language here and you'll say, oh, yeah, this is definitely talking about Mormonism. He says, and gave way to a most enigmatic figure. It was an insignificant face and form, but the attributions of him filled all heaven. In his sphere was primarily a mist which Iliel instinctively recognized as malarious, and she got an impression rather than a vision. An immense muddy river rushing through the swamps, and then she saw that from this man's brain issued phantoms like pigeons. They were neither Red Indians nor Israelites, yet they had something of each in their bearing. And these poured like smoke from the head of this little man. In his hand was a book, and he held it over his head. And the book itself was guarded by an angelic figure whose face was extraordinarily stern and unbeautiful, but who scattered with wide hands of wealth of life, children, and corn and gold. So I'm sure you picked up on neither Red Indians nor Israelites. So from all indications, he's talking about the Nephites. Yes, for sure. And the enigmatic figure is Joseph Smith. That's who he's talking about here, because he talks about with this magical book that's guarded by an angelic figure. And this was Crowley's way of putting Joseph Smith in one of his most important works that is wild to think about, because if Joseph Smith's this Christian father, as Mormonism touts him to be, and people that don't really know a lot about Christianity would think that he is, why is Crowley putting him on such a pedestal? A man who hates Christianity vehemently for what he perceives that it did to him as a child. So you have to ask those questions. What is it that that's drawn him so much to Joseph Smith? And I've got 3 things, but I kind of want to know what you thought about that particular excerpt.
I had it written down, and it did say in the footnotes that he confirmed in the book that he was speaking of Joseph Smith.
Yep.
And then I also found it interesting when he talks about the corn and the children and stuff. I'm like, wait, okay, the kids, yeah. But if he truly believes he's of Merovingian bloodline, it makes a lot of sense why the procreation, right? And Brigham as well. Brigham, his replacement, is also of the same bloodline, which Brigham is an interesting name of that time, by the way. That's a weird first name. But anyways, that and the phantoms, like pigeons, right? When you're thinking of all of this, you're like what we just talked about, like attachments, and also when he said about the malarious, when, he's talking about this, I'm like, and it makes you automatically go back to what we just said about the sickness, about being able to get things, into you. It talks about the muddy river, the Susquehanna, right again, where he was, baptized. And I'm just like, okay, and the corn. And if you look back about what all that translates into, it's not necessarily food, right?
Right.
It's interesting. And the gold too, I think it's knowledge. And the bad part is you have to understand Joseph's church is not Brigham's church. He didn't leave a successor per se because his son was too young to take over when he died. And so it was kind of up in the air. And by all rights, it should have been Sidney Rigdon. But he was sick, and they kind of had like a face off, and he came off as a weak, pathetic little guy. And, Brigham's like, rah, rah, he comes off as that he was. And sorry, the jerk he was, you can beep that. And they were tired of being ran out of everywhere. They were tired of all of it. But yet when they get here to Utah, he decides this is the place, even though the only lake around is full of like more salt than the ocean. Okay. Why? Why was this the place? What drove him here? And all of this that goes into it, I think it was like a future telling of like the things to come on top of it. I really do. And, not only gold as knowledge, but gold as, money. They are one of the wealthiest churches in the world, even though they're not that big. And so, yeah, I think he was saying like, this is not good. Like if you read this and you didn't know it was about Joseph Smith, would you think this is a good guy?
No, especially with the line, And then she saw that from his man's brain issued phantoms like pigeons, which from all indications are demonic entities.
Mhm.
And this made me think about something I saw recently. And I don't know if you've seen this. Apparently there has been a couple of masseuses come out. And I got to find the documentary that it's in. But these masseuses were massaging clients and gray aliens came out of them.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
No.
So I just saw this recently, and I know I screenshotted what I saw because I know I said I'm going to go back and watch that or something soon because this is kind of mind blowing. But it made me think of this.
Yes.
Out of his brain came phantoms like pigeons. So this is that very similar thing where people are having these entities come out of them and then they're becoming visual to the person. They're not in this astral realm anymore. They are almost using the person as a portal to come into
I absolutely
this world.
think that's real. And maybe it's back to that bargain. Like when he was almost dying, did he say, I'll do anything to the wrong person? Right? Like maybe, or, and Crowley didn't care. Crowley was like, yeah, do it. Like, if it'll work for me, like, come on in. Obviously, he didn't even want it to leave. So, I mean, when you think about these things, always think about the Bible verse that says, when they're wandering in the desert looking for a place to rest, right?
Right.
Well, if you turn on enough lights that are visible to something and make yourself available, like, it's a little concerning because over and over again, and I think also the reason why he didn't get the plates or the knowledge until he was much older is because he was a kid, right? So it couldn't overtake him completely. But yet he kept coming back every single year, every single year, every single year. They even they dug up his dead brother, I don't know if you know that.
I did hear about that. That's wild.
And so they dig him up and they say, oh, we're just checking on him because somebody said we did it. And they put it in the newspaper or we wouldn't even know. And they ran it 6 times. I mean, that's like pre-gaming. Like, hey, if you saw us, we were just checking, like, what? Like that. What? And so it just doesn't make any sense. And so at that point, when you've risked it all, your brother's dead, your leg is mangled for the rest of your life, all these things, like, are you going to quit? Joseph had more kids die than his mom did. Joseph Smith, a whole generation later, had more children die than his mother. Like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. This keeps happening.
Right. It doesn't make sense to just the average mind, but when you start looking at the toll that chasing these occult practices comes with, then you start seeing a lot of the repercussions of what you were talking about earlier, the Faustian bargain and the trade-off. You're wanting to achieve this godhood. Well, yeah, we're going to give you this, but you're also going to suffer as well on this earth.
You're going to pay
for it.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Pay the price. Look at all these musicians it happens to. Like, I mean, my husband loves Rush and we always talk about this. And I'm like, listen, Neil Peart was the guy. Like, I know you love him and he's a great drummer, but like, babe, like he was severely punished in his life. Like, it's sad, but also he was the one into reading books and weird stuff. And I'm like, I mean, it doesn't take a genius, literally. And I'm just like, sometimes you make that deal before you realize what that means, right? Like before you have the kid. Like, I mean, how many of the Hollywood people that you know of have at least one kid pass away? I'm like, that's not normal. Like, what? Why is this every person that's ever been famous? And so you start to figure it out. And, even with Crowley as detached and ornery and whatever he could be, it still messed him up really bad when his kid died. I don't think they realized that at the time because they're so into whatever they're doing. So yeah, it's sad. It's sad in a way, but
it is for sure. And I've got 3 connections with Crowley to Joseph Smith to kind of wind this thing down, and I'll stop at each one and obviously get your thoughts on each one. And I think they were very interesting. Like I said, I got a hold of this dissertation, and it was really fascinating about the parallels between Crowley and Joseph Smith. And one of the first important sources of Crowley to understand who Joseph Smith was Sir Richard Francis Burton. And he was a British explorer, army officer, Orientalist writer, and scholar. And he traveled all over the world, Asia, Africa, South America. He spoke 29 different languages, which is pretty wild to think about. And he was a part of the Royal Geographical Society. So a lot of what he did was geography and understanding, the world. And he was part of how Crowley really started learning about Joseph Smith, because this British explorer, Richard Francis Burton, visited Utah and published his famous The City of the Saints and Across the Rocky Mountains in California. And he gave it, they said, a balanced, if colorful account of Utah and the Mormons. So he painted the Mormons in a very high light. And I'd have to do some more research on Richard Francis Burton and know his inner workings and if there was any connections there personally for him. But Crowley said that Burton was one of his favorite heroes. And not only that, Crowley added Francis Burton into the Gnostic Mass as one of the saints for people to worship. And to this day, people in the OTO worship him, and they think they're worshiping the movie actor, Richard Burton. They don't know.
So that's weird.
Like the modern OTO You're people, like, unless they really know, they don't actually know why Crowley made him a saint. But the reason why Crowley made him a saint was because he wrote this book and talked of Mormonism so highly that it just enamored Crowley to the point that he had to put Burton in his Gnostic Mass for people to worship. To this day, the OTO worships him, which is pretty wild. Weird.
Yeah, that's super weird. I mean, I know that he was very, like, give props where props are due. And also, like, the other thing I saw was, like, if he didn't like you, he hated everything about you, right? Like Sherlock Holmes, I guess, came out as an anti-Mormon or something. And so he's like, yeah, I'm a pro-Mormon. That's it, and it made me laugh. But I was just like, yeah, that seems like Crowley, I mean, but he does some things that I'll tell you. And I know some of it is Masonic, but some of it, like, the Typhon move, it's in the temple. It's in the temple ceremony. And I'm just like, okay, well, this was before Crowley did that and called it that and did the things. So, obviously this stuff is older than we realize. And that's the problem with Mormonism. Isn't really, people always say to me, if you're out, just get out. What's your problem? Leave it alone. Okay, I'll do that. When you come clean and start telling people what they're doing and what they're worshiping, I'll quit it. And then if those people go in knowingly, that's on them. That's their decision. But if you continue to do these, things, which necromancy is a big part of the temple ceremony, all this stuff that is so harmful to people. Like, I didn't really feel like my soul was, like, repaired until like 18 months of hard work after this was over. Okay. And rebaptism, the whole deal. Like, it was hard work. It was attachments. It was, it was not normal. It was not normal. And, it's interesting to me that they think that's okay to have these people do this, and they harvest it, that whole loosh grab, because those people, they don't know what they're doing. I didn't know. I didn't even know what the compass and square was, and I was wearing it on my body. I thought those were sewing darts. and I really did. And I was like, I didn't even know that. Like, I didn't even know what a Mason was. Honestly, they don't tell us. People are like, yeah, well, Mormons are Masons. Well, Mormons don't know that, and you might not know everything as you go in to be a Mason, but you're going to be a Mason, and they hide things from you. Right. So, but you know the end game. Not like us, where if you're in the Mormon church, you're just trying to go to heaven, man.
Right.
That's wrong. And these things, like we've talked about through this whole show, with all these rituals obviously means something in the ether, because what happens every time they do them? So how much activity is happening in the damn temple?
Agreed. And
Yeah.
you literally touched on the last two items of
Oh,
Crowley's
on
connection.
accident. Oh,
It's great. I laughed both times you said both things, where I said, yeah, I'm about to expound on that a little bit. So one of them was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle
Oh.
in his first Sherlock Holmes book, because Study in Scarlet was basically an anti-Mormon book. The entire book was against Mormonism, and Crowley could not stand Conan Doyle at all. So
because he was a table tapper.
Right. So Conan Doyle was what they called a spiritualist. Like, he wasn't an occultist, but he was a spiritualist, and he played in all of those circles. So he was also an intellectual. So he was invited at one point to be a part of the Golden Dawn, but he was anti-Mathers, who Mathers and Crowley were tight. So he ended up being rejected because he and Mathers didn't get along. So obviously that rubbed Crowley the wrong way as well.
Right.
And he writes this book, and he creates Sherlock Holmes as this anti-Mormon character. Like, out the gate within the first couple chapters, he's just railing
such a
on
random
Mormonism.
thing. Yeah,
it's such a random thing too.
It's random.
To the point that Crowley writes, very satirically, one of the few gleams of intelligence shown in the works of Conan Doyle is where Sherlock Holmes is ignorant that the earth goes round the sun.
Oh my gosh.
Crowley creates his own detective, Simon If, his own series, and he's an occult detective, and he did that as on
He's a
purpose
one-upper.
to
He's
go
a one-upper
against Conan Doyle, which is even better. But that made him say, I love Joseph Smith and I love Mormons because I can't stand Sir
this
Arthur
guy.
Conan Doyle.
You know, it's funny because there is a satirical Book of Mormon. I don't know if you know this story, but it went to print, and the printer that actually received it knew Joseph Smith and was like, this guy's an idiot. I'm going to read this, right? So he's reading it, and he makes fun of it, and he calls it the Book of Pukei. I'm not even kidding. Like Pukei, Pukeye, or EI, I think. Anyways, this guy puts it out, and he talks, and this is why we know about Lumen Walters, because he's talking about Lumen Walters, the magician. He specifically says magician in there, and how he's a moron, and it's all satirical and stuff. And everything that basically Joseph wrote, he's like making fun of in this Book of Pukei, to the point where Joseph Smith had to go get a copyright and say, if you don't stop, I'm going to sue you. So,
wow,
yes,
that is interesting.
Speaking
I didn't know about that.
Satirical books back and forth. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And the last thing that you just brought up too was the link between Crowley and the Mormons and the relationship with Freemasonry.
Yes.
And it's interesting because, and I knew this from being a Mason and how things operate, there are different bodies, right? So I was a PHA, which is Prince Hall affiliated, which is very unusual in the South for a white guy to be part of, typically Black Lodge. And I was the first white guy in 100 years that had ever been through there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was definitely a unique set of circumstances, and it really helped me understand how the structure really worked, because you got what you call mainstream Freemasonry, and then you've got Prince Hall Freemasonry, which
Knights Templar, all these things. Yeah.
They're all under the same umbrella. And as long as you have a charter from England, because you have to have that paperwork, that makes you a legitimate lodge. Now, there are a lot of lodges out there that aren't legitimate lodges. You'll hear people say they're Freemasons. They may even be doing the rituals the same way as the mainstream Freemasons or PHA Freemasons. The problem is they don't have that charter. They don't have the documentation that gives that lodge the right to play under these circumstances. And guys get in trouble for that. And
speaking of plagiarism, Dr. Richard Spence said, if Mormonism if Freemasonry had been copyrighted, Mormonism would be in big trouble. He literally said that.
Absolutely. Well, part of this dissertation that I wrote, they actually question whether or not that Mormonism was a branch off of Freemasonry and would be considered what they called fringe Masonry or irregular Freemasonry, which was they are part of the charter, but they are more in the clandestine bracket of the umbrella. And the fact that Joseph Smith, and this is according to some anti-Mormon Masonic literature that's out there, they claim that Joseph Smith operated a lodge, a clandestine lodge in Nuevu, and it was originally chartered by proper Masonic authorities.
Yes, it was. Yep.
So,
and from Ontario, I think, in Canada.
Right. So the fact is, if we look at it from that aspect, that will be another reason that Crowley would be all about it, because he would know, as being a Freemason himself, that this was actually a chartered lodge. So if you, let's just put this in perspective. Right. This religion is a chartered Freemasonic lodge. Let's look at it legitimately now that it is actually a branch off of Freemasonry. This is a chartered lodge that Joseph Smith either brought in or was from the beginning that way. So it could be a little bit of both.
Well,
but I'm thinking,
just like the Martinism, they are occultic, Solomonic practitioners and real Freemasons. They are chartered and real. And here's the thing. I'm like, I think it makes way more sense going down that rabbit hole with him, only because they practice magic. And I think that Crowley would have been very impressed with that. I think he'd have been like, wow, this dumb kid, just from New York, Salem, like, I mean, he wasn't born there, but come on, his whole family, they were all statesmen. Like, that doesn't make any sense. They only lost. And one other thing, he was on, like, when he was digging, I wanted to bring this up with you. He was digging for these plates and digging. He had a cave. I forgot to mention that. There's a creepy cave with a whole bunch of like magical stuff that happens there. But he also is always digging. And it made me think of Seymour Cray. And it made me go, okay, why did Seymour Cray keep digging? He's the guy that invented the supercomputer, and he's talking to these little troll people, underneath his house. And he said, because the labor and the sweat and the like hard work of it, right, made him connect. And then he's in the earth, like also that whole aspect and where he's at with that Susquehanna River area. I think it's such a hot zone that he was bound to run into something, that's my opinion.
Salt Lake City has ley lines that run through it.
Oh,
so
yeah, it gets crazy. Well, there's
just
tunnels. And
right.
That's a Brigham deal. Yeah.
I've got one for you before we get out of here. And this is going to blow your mind. So I'm in Salt Lake City with Isaac, and Isaac says, I got something I want to show you guys. It's very interesting. So he tells us a story. He walks out of a bar one night and he's just walking and he looks and there's these weird symbols on the sidewalk. What is this? So he starts calling around and nobody knows. So he's out somewhere else again walking and he sees them again in a different place. He said, what is this? So he said he spent the better part in, I may quote him wrong here. So, if he's listening to this, shoot me a text and I'll get it right next time. But I think it was over a period of about a year. He's trying to find this out. And finally, he gets a hold of somebody, because he was trying everything, city departments, everything, to find out what is this? Is it just some sort of decorative thing that's put in the sidewalk? Apparently, an alchemist put these in the street, the sidewalks, and if you know how to read them, it takes you to an underground alchemical lab where all kind of alchemical practices are done underneath Salt Lake City.
What? That's crazy. What the heck? I know there's tunnels. There's a full like tunnel system. And I will tell you, because I thought you might be talking about this. He says, there's this guy that founded an alchemy school in Salt Lake City, Frater Albertus. And he was frustrated later in life because nobody would move to Salt Lake City because of the Mormons. And he had like a whole like school there and tried to like help like people learn magic and stuff. Isn't that weird?
It might be him.
And it's the Paracelsus Research Society.
See, it could be him, and I'm going to have to ask Isaac about this, who the name was. And I don't even know if Isaac got to the name of who the alchemist was, but this particular lab was secret and it was underground. But
So
I do
weird.
know that this guy had a school. So maybe this is the same
maybe it
person,
is. Oh,
but
wow.
maybe this hidden, and you have to know how to read them. And I'm telling
Yes.
you, I've seen him because I was standing right in front because he took us there. And it's just weird geometric shapes
Creepy.
that are in the sidewalk. And you're
Wow.
like, I don't know.
You're like,
what
why
this
is that there? Yeah.
But if you're an adept and you know how to
Mhm.
read them, it's a map and it will take you to where you need to go to
So
get
cool.
to this underground
I wouldn't go. It
alchemical
scared me,
lair.
but it's
I'd
cool
totally
though.
go. I love
You
this
would
stuff.
go?
I'm
I'd be
running right
scared.
in.
Okay, if you go with me, I'll go, but I'm not going by myself. I'm like, oh my gosh. And just knowing how many Mormons end up like serial killers, like, and scary stuff, like, and not dumb ones either. I'm talking about Israel Keys. I'm talking about smart people like Ted Bundy. I'm talking about some people that you're like, what? And there's just something about it that's not quite right. And I didn't want to ruin the future episode coming up, going into the temple and stuff, but I'm assuming you'll be there. Would you be there when we do the episode, or do you
I
know?
don't know. It might just
Okay.
be you. Yep.
Okay. Well, I hope you get to hear this part, but the whole temple stuff, it gets so weird that I literally was like, I got to get out of here. Like, I mean, I was sitting there like, oh my gosh, this isn't good. Like, I just had this innate feeling like, run, and I couldn't go because my whole family, like, I remember looking at my grandma and I was like, what is going on? And she goes, don't worry, you'll get used to it. And I was like, okay.
That's
Yeah.
wild.
It's weird. And I'll tell you, when she died, I have never told this, but I will tell you this. When she died, me and my mom and my daughter are all born again. And we went over to pray with her. And I was not close with her at this point because, she tried to come for me and take my kids away and stuff because I left the church. Literally, like CPS sued me, all kind of, it got
wild.
weird. Oh yeah, it got bad. And my mom just put her hands on her and said, Jesus loves you. She didn't even say like, I'm praying for you or any of that. She just said, Jesus loves you. And it was like, there was a whole bunch of other people in the room that were Mormons, like our aunts and uncles and people. They didn't hear her, but me and my daughter and my grandma saw my mom saw my grandma open her eyes and she'd been like comatose. She starts screaming, no. And we all just looked at each other and we were like, oh my gosh. And I was like, that's it. Cause I hadn't seen her in a long time. And I was just doing this cause I was like, Jesus, like, I want her to know, like, I forgive her so she doesn't hang on or something,
Right.
bad. And so I was like, that's it. I am not going down like this. Like, I'm going to get the drugs from the nurse. I can't do this. Like, I was out. And my mom and my daughter later, they were like, did you think it was weird that nobody else in the room reacted? Like, nobody acted like they heard anything. And we were like, were we in another realm or what? But even to her
That's
dying
crazy.
breath, she held on to that. That's how bad it gets, like ingrained in them.
But you would think this Christian group that
Yeah, Jesus wouldn't be upsetting. Yeah.
why does that bother you? And that's things that I always
Screaming.
bring up when I talk about all of these different religions and different sects that are out there. It just seems to funnel one way. And
Oh,
when you
yeah.
start pulling back the layers of that, you can't deny it. You can deny it, but it's undeniable if you're actually looking at the evidence. And I think for someone like you or someone like me who's been on the other side of that and is seeing all these things, and then to come out of it and then to have that knowledge, I can say this, that very similar to you, that the flack that you get from other Mormons, I get from other occultists a lot. I get
it's so
the same
hard.
thing, because
and Masons too, I'm sure. Probably.
Yeah. And I've said this on the show before too. I think it bothers people when you have the knowledge that they have, but then you're able to
be with
show
Jesus.
the biblical angle and show how it works. It really infuriates them because they hate it so much. But my biggest thing too, most of the occultists out there, Gnostics, they don't even pick it up and read it. I'm reading their stuff. Yeah. I'm reading all of their stuff. That's the difference. I'm reading everything to be able to say, now this is why I believe this, because I'm just not shooting in the dark, and you're not shooting in the dark with what's being talked about.
Sound stupid. Yeah. Like you have to make sure and just like Mormons, right? Like they're misinforming people. Mm-hmm. I don't want to misinform people worse.
Right.
So yeah, that's my thing. I'm always like, you know what? What if somebody does hear me and they're like, that's not true? You know, they're going to think you're full of it for the rest of life. And so you have to be diligent. Like, it's unfortunate that even though we're people and we're fallible, I've been wrong, I'm sure you've been wrong, we have to go that extra mile because we are talking about things that, you know, some people are not happy about, pretty much. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, look, Heidi, I had a blast with you on the show.
I too. Thank you.
I'll definitely have you back on for sure.
Awesome.
There are certain researchers I like to work with, and if I got good chemistry with them, I know it's going to be for a good show. So maybe next time I get you and Juan on at the same time.
Oh,
and
yeah.
we have
that'd
a
be
full-on
fun.
Blast. I haven't done 3 people yet, so maybe we do that. That would be pretty cool.
That'd be cool. Yeah, I know a lot more now. Probably Juan's like, that girl, she doesn't know. Nah, but now I know a lot more. And I was learning at the time. All I knew was I was supposed to expose it. That was my job. And even today, reading a couple reviews on my Apple, I was like, wow, this guy was like, I had 1 foot out the door. That's how I found you, you know, in my LDS faith, and I'm out. Thank you. Praise God. And I was like, okay, it's good enough, man. That's okay. It just made everything worth it, you know?
Absolutely. I was talking to Tony the other day, and I told him that some of the episodes that I do that don't do super great numbers wise, I probably get the most DMs and emails from people thanking me for either strengthening their faith or showing them an angle that they weren't seeing, that maybe they were about to go down the wrong path.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have to look at that in perspective too, that, you know, it's not about the numbers really. It's about, you know, the message. And I have to remind myself of that a lot too, because you have a natural proclivity to want to build and grow. And I think we should do that. And you want to be at the top of your game. But at the same time, you also have to look at the real aspect of it and who you're reaching. And I think that's the most important thing at the end of the day.
Yes.
But again, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yes, thank you so much.
Tell everybody where to find you and everything you do.
Perfect. I am Heidi Luv. I'm of the Unfiltered Rise Podcast. I do have a Patreon where I do a little bit different stuff because I want to give people extra shows and never cut any of my stuff. And so for $5 a month, you get 2 extra shows, and they're all about murders, Mormons, and mayhem. And so my last one was Israel Keys, as I mentioned. And, you know, we kind of try and find the obscure things. And I actually do it with an ex-Mormon that is an atheist. And so it makes for some fun conversation. We have completely different views on most things, but at the end we leave as friends, and it's kind of a fun time. So, and then otherwise Spotify, Apple, all the, main places, and at unfilteredrisepodcast.com. So
awesome. Yeah, guys, make sure you go check her out there and look for her on the confessionals too, where she's going to tell her personal story, which is going to be very interesting, and Tony's going to love it. I already told him. I was like, yeah, get ready, it's going to be good, because he loves this kind of stuff, all the clandestine
I'm going to bring him some slides, some spooky stuff.
That. Yeah, anything you can show for sure. For everybody listening, go check out my new single Missing on all streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, anywhere else. And you know what it is, guys. Go outside, touch grass, and get your tail out the hole.
Sometimes I feel alone when I'm looking at myself, cause I look down the road full of bottles, broken nails. So I just try to go, swerving off the road. I used to do it for the roses, adulation, so they noticed. Used to say they weren't my focus, lying jonesing for the Joneses things. I know that everything that's going on can start to overwhelm. Like the war on terror is just a war within ourselves. Are you woke or are you awake? Genuine or are you fake? I'm feeling like I'm sent by UPS with all the tape. These boxes are all made by delusions that we chase, but I'm just staying base. Snakes are slithering, they keep it snake. She coming with the cake, but how it's baked is important, but so is what you bring. Cause being real ain't acting like a king. I feel I'm spinning round and about to crash. Chaos all around me, feeling trapped. All this pressure mounts, I wanna crack. Like I'm going around in circles. Like I'm going around in circles. Like I'm going around, like I'm going around. Like I'm going around in circles. Like I'm going around. It's hard for me to bother. Look at leashes on the collars of these people. Follow monsters like a mogwai in the water, then they multiply. It's easy to get bitter. I'd rather dulcify, I'd rather justify anything but selling me. Leave me alone with the mic like a spelling bee. Smoking guns in your face, but you disagree. I ain't have to change your mind, I'm just hoping that you'll listen. I'm just hoping that a little bit of what I'm saying will make you take a second and see that everything ain't adding up. I know it's hard, I know it's hard.